Good morning and welcome to Victory is Mine with Pastor Andy Stump of Victory Christian Center in Carthage, Missouri. Start your day with a powerful message of hope, faith, and victory in Jesus Christ. Here's Pastor Andy, bringing you encouragement straight from God's Word.
Good morning. Yesterday we looked at Romans chapter 9, and we looked at verses 10 through the end of the chapter. And I read quite a bit because I believe the context of the whole chapter is quite important to understanding the chapter. I don't have time to read it again today, but if you want to listen to yesterday's program or go ahead and pause and read chapter 9, I think that could be helpful to refresh your memory as I talk about some of the concepts here in this chapter. Now, as I said yesterday, I believe it is so important to keep in mind that this passage is not some theological treatise on the sovereignty of God. He is in the middle of a whole argument describing one thing and one thing only, and that is the gospel and how we receive the benefits of the gospel. Once again, don't forget the purpose statement of the whole book. It's in Romans 1, 16 and 17. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. And then he clarifies who he means by everyone. He says, first for the Jew, then for the Gentile. For in the gospel, a righteousness from God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last. As it is written, the righteous will live by faith. So in that purpose statement, we see this new covenant that is not based on the old covenant, but it is for the Jews who had the first covenant, but then now also for the Gentiles, and it's on the basis of faith. So let's look at some components of this chapter that I hope will be clearer to you, that Paul's not just saying God arbitrarily chooses who will be saved and who will not be saved because of his sovereignty, but he's still arguing this case that even though the Jews had this covenant and have this new covenant available to them also, the basis for the covenant and entering into this covenant has changed. In the first covenant, the right relationship with God was based on what a person did, or, as Paul says here in verse 12, by works, or in verse 16, man's desire or effort. And finally, in the conclusion of this chapter, in verses 30 through 33, Paul contrasts the Gentiles with the Jews who pursued a law of righteousness by works. And then he gives an indication of why it was difficult for the Jewish people to accept the gospel, and that's because they stumbled over the stumbling stone that says, you ain't going to come up with this by your works. You have to come to Jesus and believe in him and what he has done for you for your righteousness. That proposition caused them to stumble. Instead, Paul says throughout this chapter, this new covenant is based on something totally different. It's based on God's mercy. Verse 16 and verse 23. It's based on God's call, not human effort and accomplishment. And really a major part of Paul's argument here in the book of Romans is that this was always God's intent, as seen in how Abraham was declared righteous. Abraham was declared righteous because it was by faith. So when he says not all Israel was Israel, it's because they were not part of the children of promise. They were not part of the children of Abraham who believed a promise from God and was declared righteous. I believe it's also important to recognize that Paul's talking about Abraham, Sarah, Rebekah, Isaac in this passage, much in the same way that he speaks of these people in Galatians, which has been considered a sister book to Romans. And I think it's important then in understanding Paul's usage of these people and their names. He is contrasting covenants. So when he's talking about Isaac in Galatians chapter 4, verse 28, he says, now you brothers, like Isaac, are children of the promise, not of law, not of human effort, not of human desire, of grace, the promise, God's mercy, and therefore those who believe the gospel are also children of the promise, and their father is Abraham. And when understood in that light, Paul is not arguing for God arbitrarily picking those who are to be saved and those who are to be damned. He says, I'm establishing a new covenant in which the basis for being made right with God is faith and not human effort or desire.
Thank you for joining us on Victory is Mine. If you're looking for a church home, we'd love to welcome you to Victory Christian Center in Carthage, Missouri at 13996 Burr Oak Road. Join us this Sunday at 10 a.m. or 5:30 p.m. and experience God's love, power, and victory in your life. You can also learn more about us at vccchurch.org. Have a blessed day.